Morning and welcome to today's Grad Prof Dev webinar, How to Conduct Successful Informational Interviews. My name's Heather Brandt. I'm Associate Dean in the Graduate School and Professor of Health Promotion, Education, and Behavior in the Arnold School of Public Health at the University of South Carolina. Before we get started with today's webinar, I have a few housekeeping items for our live viewers. If you are viewing this webinar live, please take a moment to familiarize yourself with the webinar toolbar. And if there are any handouts, which there are for today's webinar, access the handouts under the handouts ribbon on the webinar toolbar. And if you have questions at any time during the webinar, enter your questions under the questions ribbon on the webinar toolbar. If you are viewing the recorded version of this Grad Prof Dev webinar, How to Conduct Successful Informational Interviews, please email gradprofdev@sc.edu for a PDF of today's webinar slides. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. During today's webinar on conducting successful informational interviews, I'm going to cover some basics about what an informational interview is. I'm going to share 3 really important things with you that are necessary to know and do and really think about before jumping into doing informational interviews. I'm going to give you information on how to conduct an informational interview and give you some resources to help you develop your own approach to doing that. I'll finish up with highlighting a few of the Grad Prof Dev resources for grad students here at the University of South Carolina, including our programs that we have left for the fall 2019 semester. And finally, there will be time for your questions and answers. So to get started, the first thing I'm going to do is, for those of you who are participating live, I'm going to launch a poll for you. And the poll is asking you, have you ever conducted an informational interview? So if you could take a moment to vote, we'll make sure that everyone has had a chance to vote. We'll see what the results are. So hopefully you can see on your screen the real-time results. They're not showing, I don't think, currently, but regardless, with the poll, most of you who are on the live version of the webinar have conducted an informational interview. So that's great. You'll have a lot of experience to be able to add to the conversation today. So first, what is an informational interview? So you may hear this term a lot, informational interview, and how does it differ from a regular interview, and what's informational about it? Well, first, I want to begin by emphasizing what an informational interview is not. It is not a job interview, and it's not an opportunity to ask for a job. However, it's possible that through your conduct of informational interviews that you may be in a position in the future to have important insider information about applying for and being considered for a job. So keep that in mind as I share more information about informational interviews and how to conduct them. So it's not a job interview, it's not a place or time to ask for a job, but it really can set you up for future opportunities. So what is an informational interview? It's really a conversation between you and a professional in a field that's of interest to you. And often the most current and specific information about a career field may not be available online, or you may not be learning about that during the course of your graduate degree program. Faculty mentors, people like me, and advisors, also people like me, here on campus do our best to keep up with employment trends and thinking about how you can put your degree to work after you complete it, but we don't always have the most up-to-date information. So informational interviews are a way for you to have these conversations with people who are working in areas that are of interest to you. Informational interviews are effective research tools and are best done after some initial and preliminary preparation. Again, it's not a job interview, and the objective is not to find job openings. And sometimes you may even feel awkward reaching out to people you don't know. But most people actually enjoy taking a few minutes out of their day to reflect on their professional life and give advice to someone with an interest in their field. I'll talk a little bit later in today's webinar about how you can capitalize on your status as a graduate student and how people tend to want to give back to students who are asking these important questions as they prepare for their future. There are many benefits of informational interviews. And informational interviews allow you to get firsthand relevant information about the realities of working within a particular field, industry, or position. This kind of information, as I noted, is not always readily available online. And actually talking to someone who is doing the type of work that you think you may want to do can give you an additional and expanded perspective on what that looks like. You can find out about career paths you didn't know that existed. So even if you think someone's doing really cool work and maybe it's not something that you're prepared to do in the future, still talking to them about their career path and journey can be beneficial. You'll be able to get tips and insider knowledge about how to prepare for and land your first position. I think especially for graduate students, this is important to understand the marketplace and landscape in which you'll be pursuing employment after you finish your degree. You can learn more about what it's like to work at a specific organization. What are the norms within this employment setting? How does this employer support your growth and development as an employee? What is the reputation of this employer? There are lots of ways for you to get that type of information by doing informational interviews. And lastly, and importantly, doing informational interviews allows you to initiate a professional relationship and expand and extend your network of contacts in a specific career field or area, or even geographic location. For grad students, especially those who come here to Columbia, South Carolina, here at the University of South Carolina to do their graduate work, maybe you're coming from other places. And so to learn more about the Columbia, South Carolina area and employment opportunities, it can be very useful to help build your network by having these informational interviews. You can meet people who may forward job leads to you in the future. And informational interviews can be your first step to developing a strong professional network that includes people external to the university setting as well as within the University of South Carolina. Establishing these relationships with people who share your interests also fortifies your career ambitions by giving you beneficial connections and teaching you more about your chosen field and potential employment settings and opportunities. And referral processes that come from informational interviews would put you in contact with key people who you might not otherwise ever have the chance to meet. So informational interviews are not only for those who are pursuing their first or one of their first careers, but can be useful at any time. In fact, informational interviews are often a very useful strategy during career transition and as someone is progressing through their career. I will say that I find great benefits in doing informational interviews, perhaps less formally than you may be interested as you're thinking about your career pathway. But I find informational interviews to be very helpful when I go have brief meetings with people who maybe I know or have met briefly previously, just to hear more about what they're up to, what they're doing, what their day is like, what they're excited about. All of these different interactions really help to fortify relationships and build and extend a professional network. So as I mentioned, I have these things that I want to make sure I share with you. So before we dive in to specifically how to conduct an informational interview and take advantage of all those benefits, I have 3 really important things that you should know and do before conducting informational interviews. First, networking. In order to know who and with whom you should be having these informational interviews and how to even get started, networking is a prominent activity. So hopefully, as graduate students, you've already started, and if you haven't, start now to build your professional network across many levels. Find those who are part of your network in your discipline area, in your desired career path, also people who are in a similar geographic region, people who are just doing really interesting and inspirational work. Start building that network. Informational interviews can be your first step to greater development of a professional network. Also, through informational interviews, you can figure out who it is you want to talk to next. And networking often helps to generate some of those ideas. Again, establishing these relationships with people who share your interests really helps to give strength to your career ambitions and gives you information and connections and gives you more insight and background on your chosen field. Remember, following up after networking interactions is key, and following up after informational interviews is equally important. You'll always want to be professional. That's coming up more on that too. And be thankful, express gratitude for the time and effort that's given. Now, it's important to note that some attempts are more successful than others. And there are some people with whom we want to learn from or we want to interact with, talk to, that we simply have to put in a little bit more work to get to the point where we're able to have that type of desired interaction. However, perseverance usually pays off, especially when talking about, as a grad student, you're interested in learning more about this career pathway, how they ended up where they are now, and getting that insight that becomes really, really important to making the best choices for you. Next is your professional persona. So I've been getting a lot of questions from graduate students about this professional persona, and especially thinking about your online social media footprint, how to take advantage of LinkedIn. So just a few tips here on professional persona. As you enter into the space where you want to engage with individuals who are in careers that are of interest to you, and for you to explore these potential career paths or just get information about someone's professional journey, it's important to think about your professional persona. This is directly related to conducting successful informational interviews. If you're meeting at a coffee shop on a Saturday morning outside of work hours, it may be okay for you to dress casually. However, most informational interviews are going to happen during work hours in a professional setting, especially if first meeting with someone. So you'll want to dress professionally and at minimum dress business casual. Carolina Closet, here on the campus of the University of South Carolina, offers access to professional attire at reduced costs, and this is located in the Blatt PE Center. Carolina Closet is open on Tuesdays and Wednesdays from 1 to 5. This is organized in part by the student government here at the university. And if you have questions, you can reach out to them about what's available. The Career Center has previously sponsored Suit Up events with JCPenney. We've already had the event for this fall, but I know they're planning an event for spring 2020 that will help enhance your access to professional attire at reduced costs. And quite honestly, local thrift and discount shops often have professional attire that's in really great shape and at greatly reduced costs. You also can ask family, friends, or your peers about borrowing something if you need to. So you do have options to dress professionally, even in times when your resources may be limited. And why this matters is the first impressions can be really important in a professional and workplace setting. Here on the college campus, you'll find a wide range of attire and what constitutes professional dress. If you're in Osborne, where the president's offices, the provost's offices are, you will see folks dressed mostly in suits and very professionally dressed. But as you walk across campus, you'll see a wide range. So just keep in mind that regardless, dressing as neatly and professionally as you can is a good strategy when doing these informational interviews. Think about your personal branding in the workplace. So I picked this image on purpose so that you can think about if your social media, if you're on social media and your social media are not private, or you have different privacy settings. For example, on LinkedIn, get a professional headshot. We have offered professional headshots for free to graduate students in the fall semester. We'll be offering them again in the spring. And make sure that you have a professional headshot if you're going to be promoting your social media or using your LinkedIn account and sharing that on your materials, such as your resume or your CV. You want to make sure that your personal branding in the workplace is professional. Your personal persona also relates to how you conduct yourself publicly. Are you a fully engaged listener? Do you consider nonverbal cues? Do you project confidence? Are you able to manage conflict well? It's also the image you project to coworkers, and that's defined really broadly, especially here in settings where we're working with students at all levels. We're working in departments or colleges or places and spaces here on campus that have a wide range of staff. But how do you project yourself? And then, as I mentioned, your online footprint. You should have a professional headshot and have a one-page bio, preferably one that has a fair amount of white space and includes bullets with your contact information at the top, your photo, and just some bullets about your experience, your educational background, perhaps. This is a bit of a synopsis and can become a useful tool to project your professional persona in interactions that are for the purposes of informational interviews. So here are a few tips to be the best professional you. The goal here is for you to refine and integrate the advice that you receive or the guidance that you receive in a way that's right for you, that you feel comfortable about and with, and that positions you to be true to your core values, to capitalize on your best and unique traits, because we all have those and bring those to the table. And think about the qualities and inherent skills that you have, and how can you improve upon those qualities that maybe right now don't serve you well. You need to do this in your own way, on your own time, and with the type and level of support and guidance that's going to work for you. Strong communication, listening, interpersonal, stress management, conflict negotiation, and many other skills are essential. But it's how you cultivate, combine, and put into practice these skills and continually hone them in a professional context that constitutes your professional identity and is going to distinguish you from others. So if you haven't thought about this, think about your professional values. As students, you're currently learning, but if you're interested in pursuing additional education and training in your field, you're always demonstrating your lifelong learning interests. You want to make sure that you're being you and true to you and being yourself, and be open to feedback. I think that feedback really helps to shape a professional persona. Take time to think through your responses and reactions in situations. Think about how your core values, professional values, maybe are evolving. And make sure you set up what's comfortable for you in terms of personal and professional boundaries. That can be a really important precedent in today's 24/7 digital age for how you expect others to respond to you and how you will be responding and how you will be interacting across personal and professional spaces. And don't unintentionally or directly sabotage yourself. Give yourself space to make mistakes and learn and grow from them. And lastly, self-assessment and reflection. You can't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been and where you are today. And self-assessment and reflection are critical activities for your professional development. There are several resources available to help you consider how your interests, skills, and values shape your desired career path, and help you consider other lesser known paths of which you may not be aware. Self-assessment and reflection is ideally done more than one time during your exploratory period, which is usually earlier on in your degree program, while obtaining additional knowledge and skills, like you in graduate school, as well as throughout your career. I've been on faculty here at the University of South Carolina for 15 years, and I continue to revisit my own interests, skills, and values and reflect on how those do or do not align with my chosen career path. And in addition, self-assessment and reflection helps me learn about areas of strength as well as my areas of weakness to help me align necessary interactions, training, skill development to contribute to my goal setting and planning. So this can happen at any phase of a career and any phase of a learning period, including while in graduate school and beyond. Take some time to think through key questions about your preferred work style, which is going to feed into your ability to get the information you want and need through informational interviews. What are your professional values? In what environments do you do your best work? How do you prefer to work? Are there spaces in which you do not perform well? These are commonly used questions for self-assessment and reflection. And I want to take a moment to recommend Imagine PhD, which is a free online assessment. And Imagine PhD is designed to meet the need for specifically humanities and social science PhDs. However, the assessments are universal and can be accessed for free. And so what the Imagine PhD online platform does is it allows you to assess your career-related interests, skills, and values, explore career paths that are appropriate to your interests, skills, and values, helps you to create self-defined goals and map out the next steps for your career and professional development success. There also are a few articles on Inside Higher Education about career assessments that may be of interest to you, but Imagine PhD is a great free online tool. So those three things, again, that are really important that you should know and do before you jump into conducting informational interviews are making sure that you're networking and using your network to help identify people with whom you can conduct informational interviews. Thinking about your professional persona and making sure that you're putting forward the best you to be confident in your ability to have these types of productive conversations with other professionals. And lastly, using self-assessment and reflection to really help pull it all together. So those are the three tips before we jump into how to conduct an informational interview. So for the steps that are involved in how to conduct an informational interview, I'm going to be relying on resources that are available through the University of South Carolina Career Center, as well as the University of California, Berkeley Career Center, both of which have really great resources and tools for you as grad students to be able to learn more about how to successfully conduct informational interviews. So how to conduct an informational interview. So first, research career fields. Maybe you've always known exactly what you wanted to do, or maybe you have not. Maybe you entered into graduate school because you liked the field in which you are obtaining an advanced degree, and you know about what you can do with that degree, but are unsure of what you want to do with your degree. All of these various scenarios can certainly happen. So keep that in mind as we're thinking through these different ways in which, these different steps and ways in which you conduct informational interviews. All of these scenarios are possible. And ideally, before you entered into a graduate degree program, you had the chance to think through where you eventually wanted to go. But life happens, your interests may change, you may be inspired by other career pathways. All of these happen too. So as a first step here in how to conduct an informational interview, take time to think through career fields. And again, as grad students, you're likely already in that career field, and you may have already done this. And if you have, make a list of your desired career paths and what you consider to be the main advantages and disadvantages of each path. This should line up very closely with self-assessment and reflection if you've taken some time to do that. For example, how do these various career fields align with your professional values, your desired working environment, the way in which you're most productive, the way in which you get the most value out of the work that you're doing, the ways in which you feel most energized. Those are the ways in which you can research career fields more in depth, and as well as being able to integrate from your self-assessment and reflection activities. All right, the second step is identify people to interview. You can start by just making a simple list of who you want to contact, and make this list based on the research you've done about potential career fields, talking with your mentors or advisors, doing LinkedIn alumni searches through your own network of contacts, and other ways in which you may search or find folks. You'll want to spend time learning about the people with whom you want to do informational interviews. You want to take a second to do some research not only on the people, but also the employer, to help you ask the best questions and to help you get the most out of the informational interview. So let's take a look at a couple of examples. So the first example here is to identify people to interview. And so Amy has recently become interested in public policy, but is unsure how to find people in the field to talk to. She has worked as a volunteer for a local nonprofit during her master's program for the last year and a half. What could she do next? So take a moment using the questions function on the webinar toolbar to share your recommendations for what you think Amy could do next. And she is again working to identify people with whom she can conduct an informational interview. So one example is she could talk to whomever is her supervisor in the local nonprofit to find out if that local nonprofit is connected to advocacy and policy activities in the area. She could begin by also identifying her own elected officials at the local, state, or even national level, and find out who are the people within their offices doing the public policy work. She could look for public policy think tanks. She could talk with leaders of other nonprofit organizations who may have active advocacy and policy agendas that they pursue, again, at a local, state, or national level. So she has lots of options here, and it's exciting that she's come to realize that she's interested in public policy. And it's a common place for someone who is in this space. I'm really interested in this. Now, who do I talk to? So those are some strategies. She also can get online and look for various public policy entities that are in close proximity to her, because you can do informational interviews in person, over the phone. You also can use Zoom or Skype or some other remote technology that is commonplace for you to use. All right, the next case study here is Jose is a doctoral student in the biological sciences program. He's been trying to think through what he wants to do after he completes his degree in the next year. When he started the doctoral program, he was certain he wanted a faculty position at a research university. However, now he's less certain and may be interested in other sectors such as industry. What could he do next? So this is an opportunity, first of all, depending on Jose's relationship with his mentors and advisors within his department, to have preliminary conversations. However, some doctoral students are reluctant because perhaps they have the impression that their mentors or advisors expect them to pursue faculty positions after completing their degree. While that may not always be the case, certainly that can be a scary proposition as you're moving through a doctoral degree program. So maybe Jose has taken a class from someone in another department who he may feel comfortable speaking with. Perhaps there is someone else in his department with whom he could talk. He also could use the alumni search function on LinkedIn to identify folks. He could, through various professional conferences, visit booths and exhibits by industry leaders in his field that would potentially have positions available that may be of interest to him. There are lots of different ways that he can start to generate a list of people with whom to conduct informational interviews. And as we're going along here, I want to also be clear, not only can these be done in a wide range of ways, phone, in person, remotely, you also don't have to do a lot of them, or you can do a lot of them. There's value in doing one, just as there's value in doing many informational interviews. And it can be reaffirming sometimes to help you feel better about a chosen path. It also can help give you some things to think about in terms of the path that you want to take. The third step is to prepare for the interview. And preparing for the interview involves a few key steps. And let's keep in mind that when you're reaching out to people, they do like to talk about themselves and their own professional journey and are happy to help you as a graduate student. But you need to prepare on your end too. So first, develop your quote unquote elevator pitch. So this is a very brief description about you and about why you are talking to this person. So this is as simple as, my name is Heather Brandt. I am Associate Dean in the Graduate School and Professor of Health Promotion, Education, and Behavior in the Arnold School of Public Health at the University of South Carolina. And I've been in this faculty position for the last 15 years. And I'm interested in learning from you about how you have been working in this organization as a doctorally trained public health professional. Tell me more about, I'm looking forward to learning more and have you tell me more about your professional journey that you've taken in this to work in this space. So just something very brief and very quick about you, and perhaps sometimes you'll get some follow-up questions, but have something prepared about you, about what you're interested in, and about why you're talking to this person. Regardless of the informational interview that you're conducting, your first questions should always be about the person you're interviewing, about that person's professional journey. How did you end up in this position? And that will open the doors for additional discussion, and you may get some of your other questions answered as well. But finding out how the person with whom you're conducting the informational interview ended up in the current position is a good start to any informational interview. And then you should be prepared with additional questions based on what you already know about the person and his, her, their position and the employer. This is important to demonstrate your preparation and appreciation for this person's time, because these informational interviews are usually no longer than 30 minutes. Additional questions that you can ask are available on the Career Center website. And be prepared with these additional questions, and depending on what you know, you may ask about any of these things during the informational interview. But once again, you want to keep the interview to no longer than 30 minutes. Be respectful of the person's time. You can always follow up later with a few additional questions by email or phone, or maybe even if you have a connection, you will meet again. The questions also should reflect your self-assessment and be based on your preferred interests, skills, and values from your self-reflection and assessment. For example, if you want to work a 9-to-5 job and want to focus on a 40-hour work week, you likely want to ask about expectations for working more than 40 hours, working in the evenings and on the weekends. You may not want to be quite so direct, so ask about working conditions more broadly and probe as needed to make sure that you get more information about that employer or that position. Another example is if you have a family and you have children that you need to drop off at daycare or school or pick them up, how flexible are the work hours for parents and caregivers? So here are some examples of questions that you may want to ask. What obligations does your workplace upon you outside the standard 40-hour work week? So that's one way in which to get at that information. What are the travel obligations for your position? Is there overtime, and is it due more to the nature of this field or the nature of your position or the nature of this particular organization? How do your work requirements balance with your family and personal commitments? Can you leave work at work, or do you take work home with you? Those are some examples of questions that can get at that work-life harmony or work-life balance, and thinking about how this position is going to influence the way in which you live your life outside of work. The University of California, Berkeley Career Center also has a list of questions that are commonly asked during an informational interview. And remember, these questions should be based on what you already know about the person with whom you're conducting the informational interview, and also should be based on your self-reflection and your assessment and understanding what you want to get out of the interview. So these are just a few examples. And I really like the one about current issues and trends in the field that you should know about. Remember, I mentioned that it's not always commonplace in an academic environment to get the best information for grad students about that. You can get sometimes that information through your professional societies that are national or regional or even local. You can gain that information from mentors and advisors sometimes, but asking people who are within the university and even external about this can be very informative. So once you have thought about the career field in which you want to explore your opportunities by doing an informational interview, and once you have thought through who do you want to contact or the types of people you want to contact, you've now prepared for the interview. The next step is to initiate contact. And one question that I often get is when you contact someone by email or phone, like how many times should you send an email or call, and how long should you wait for someone to respond? So if you are going to send an email, and if you have an email and a good phone number for the person, you can always call first, or you could email first. But either way, you can do both on the same day. And if you call first, you can say, I also will follow up with an email, so you will have my contact information. And if you email first, you can say, I will give you a call later today to check in with you about possibly having the opportunity to meet. And so once you do that, you should generally give people about 1 week to respond. And after a week, it's okay to follow up with a second email or follow up with a first or second phone call, depending on the approach that you're most comfortable with. But you want to give people some time. I usually say after 2 or 3 times doing this, usually after the first prompt, you'll get a response, but after 2 or 3 times doing this, you may just have to accept that this person is unable to respond to you at this time. Maybe it's not that they're disinterested or don't want to help you, but you never know what's going on the other end of the email or other end of the phone. You'll want to indicate how you identified this person in your communication. If you're calling, whether it's a good time to talk for a few minutes. Sometimes people will pick up their phone on their way into or out of a meeting, thinking it's maybe about that. So you always want to check on that. Emphasize that you're just looking to learn and looking for information. And then work to identify a time that you can meet. And in case the person says, now is a good time, can we just do this now? You should be prepared with, again, your elevator pitch about you and about why you want to talk with the person. Begin by asking about that person's professional journey to his or her, their current position. And thirdly, having questions that are ready for this specific person, often tailored to each individual. Here's an example of what the email could look like. So the email is going to include in the subject line exactly what you want. Dear, and being professional in how you're reaching out, Dr., Mr., Ms., whatever the preferred salutation is. Introduce yourself and relationship to the contact if you have one. This is going to be a very abbreviated form of your elevator pitch. Make your request and then request your response. So, for example, in the part where you're introducing yourself, make sure you say, I am a current graduate student. I am a graduate student, master's student / doctoral student, whatever your student status is at the University of South Carolina in the blank program or blank department. And I am interested in talking with you about potential career pathways in the field of or at organization X. So don't make sure that you don't forget to mention your student status. People are often very much inclined to help out a student, more so than others sometimes. And then be clear about your ask. Don't bury the lead. You're likely reaching out to people who are busy. And this is a good way to make sure that you're crystal clear in what you're asking about, that you know exactly what you want. I would like to conduct a 30-minute informational interview with you to ask you questions about your professional journey and a few others as I explore potential career paths after I complete my degree. That's it. That's all you have to do in the email. And then you want to make sure you're clear. Now, these headings are included in here as an example. You would not want to use these headings in your actual email or in your actual communication. So this last part here, where please let me know some days and times where I have request response, you would of course delete that. That's just a prompt to remind you of this is where you're going to ask for what you would like back. Make sure you include your contact information in the email, and if you're calling on the phone, make sure to say your name clearly and slowly, as well as your telephone number. Make sure to repeat it 2 times. This is really helpful for people who are just quickly listening to their messages. So it will help with the follow-up if you can make it easy to find your information. Another thing is if you have a bio, the 1-page bio and headshot document, just a Word document that's 1 page with some information, you can send this information as an attachment and reference it so that maybe somebody can take a look and get a little bit more information about you. You also should make sure to send reminders. So the day before or business day before you have a scheduled phone interview, in-person interview, or some other remote technology interview, let's just say Zoom, you'll want to send a reminder. And that's a perfect opportunity to have that 1-pager ready to go and send. It's a nice reference point. If you're going in person, you can take a copy of your resume or CV, but don't plan on pushing that across the desk, or don't plan on sending that by email unless it's requested by the person with whom you're conducting the informational interview. Again, if you have this 1-page short and sweet bio about your background and experience, that is often going to be a much more useful tool than a 2-page resume that is just highlighting your skills, or a longer CV highlighting many of your academic products and accomplishments. The 5th step is to actually conduct the informational interview. So here are some tips for how to do that. So make sure that you're putting forward your best and most professional you. You want to make sure that you schedule this if you're doing it in person, on the phone, or using Zoom or something else, that you're ready to go right on time or even a few minutes early. You may want to take some notes, and you should have your questions. Remember, a successful informational interview is going to begin with your brief elevator pitch, a question about the person with whom you're conducting the informational interview, with that person's professional journey, and then specific questions for that person that align very closely with your self-reflection and assessment. You should be ready, but you also want to take advantage of how the conversation flows. Perhaps through your discussion, you find that maybe you both like something and have something in common, and that can often be a bonding place and space. So take advantage of that. And you'll always want to finish with 2 questions. So finishing with, can I contact you again if I have additional questions? And also saying, now that we've had a chance to talk a little bit and you've learned a little bit about me and what I'm thinking about for what comes next after I complete my graduate degree, do you have recommendations for other people maybe I could meet or talk to? And you'll be surprised that there are times when the people with whom you're conducting the informational interviews will actually provide an email introduction or other introduction to help you make those connections as well. And lastly, and importantly, you want to make sure that you follow up. So keep track of who you talk to. Write down what you've learned, what more you'd like to know, because as you do more of these informational interviews, you should have this opportunity to be able to build and expand on your questions, because you may have some questions seemingly answered, and there may be other questions you want to learn more about, and what your next steps should be. Send a thank you note within 1 to 2 days to show your appreciation for the person's time and effort and information given. And you can decide based on whether the informational interview was informal, businesslike, formal. A handwritten thank you note, if you have a good mailing address, is always a nice touch. You also can simply send an email to follow up, or something more formal like a business letter. And if you've made a connection with this person and had a nice interaction, keep in touch. You never know what else that person could do in terms of being helpful to you. And you also can keep them updated on how perhaps something they shared with you, told you, recommended to you, prompted you to act on their advice, and what the outcome of that was. So these folks with whom you're conducting informational interviews can certainly become part of your professional network. So 6 steps to success when it comes to informational interviews: researching career fields, and maybe if you already know the general career field in which you want to work, prospective employers, prospective positions within those employment settings, to gain that information. That will be important background. Identify people to interview, prepare for the interview, initiate contact in a professional way, conduct the informational interview, and then, as always, follow up. Did it really happen if you didn't follow up? No. So make sure that you're following up. And of course, the 3 things that you really need to know and do before you do these informational interviews are networking, addressing your professional persona, and self-assessment and reflection. And those feed in really nicely to these 6 steps for how to have successful informational interviews. Here are some additional resources that may be of interest to you, and please be sure to check out Graduate School social media today for the Grad Prof Dev Professional Development Friday focus on informational interviews. We've posted several resources, including a recently recorded podcast, resources from beyond the professoriate that they've developed, as well as a few tips here from the Muse, which has some really basic advice about doing good informational interviews, and Inside Higher Ed, which always has insightful commentary on these professional development topics. As you're thinking about questions, please remember you can put those questions under the questions ribbon on the webinar toolbar, and I will get to those in just a moment. I want to run through, as a reminder, some of the Grad Prof Dev resources that we have available to you as graduate students. So first of all, you can access our welcome from Dean Cheryl Addy, the top 10 tips for graduate students, and an overview of our fall 2019 professional development resources through these links. You can access a PDF if you are a live viewer under the handouts ribbon on the webinar toolbar. You also can email gradprofdev@sc.edu to receive a PDF of today's webinar slides. We have 4 events coming up next month. This is our last event for October, but on November 1st, we'll be having Writing Your Teaching Philosophy. November 7th is Start Smart. November 8th, for the first time, we're going to be offering Start Smart with a focus on faculty negotiation. And in order to participate in the November 8th faculty negotiation workshop, you will need to have attended a previous basic Start Smart. And so notice that you can go to the basic Start Smart on November 7th and then join right away in the faculty workshop on November 8th. And lastly, on November 22nd, we're going to be doing another webinar on getting the mentoring that you need. Here's the link to access the grad school's social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, the YouTube channel, LinkedIn, and WordPress blog. And today's topic is informational interviews. We have lots of resources for you on this topic, in addition to the information that you received on today's webinar. So as you're thinking about what questions you would like to ask, please remember to complete the brief evaluation after today's webinar ends. And another important caveat here to the information that you received today, it's always a good idea to talk with your mentors and advisors in your specific discipline to get some information on important contextual clues that may be critical for you being successful in conducting this informational interview. So I'm going to give you all just a brief amount of time here to enter in any questions that you may have, and otherwise that will bring today's webinar to an end. So let's wait just a moment. If you do have questions after today's webinar, please email us at gradprofdev.sc.edu. Also, please remember to take advantage of the resources that were provided. Thank you and have a great rest of the week and semester.